You know, when you consider like all the stressful situations in life and different things that it throws at you, a helpful way I've thought to sort of process everything is just to understand that everything was intended to be difficult for you personally, and everything is intended to throw you off and damage you specifically.
Yes. Yes. all circumstances.
There's
events,
no other reasonable explanation other than
that couldn't be a cognitive distortion.
No.
You are absolutely the center of the universe around which failure and troubles revolve.
Yep, you specifically have been doomed to fail by those out there who oppose you.
Them, you
Them.
know.
The ever nebulous.
They don't want you to be able to open your garage door the first time you press the button.
I noticed it actually hasn't been responding as well on the cold.
Yeah, that shouldn't, from a radio perspective, that shouldn't do anything. It's probably just the cold battery or the coldness of the remote or something.
Perhaps. I was afraid I was out of battery and I would have to get out and into my car to open and close the garage door.
And you have to figure out where the heck the battery's even stored without breaking the garage door opener remote.
Actually, recently my key fob for my car doesn't respond. It must be out of batteries.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been kind of just manually unlocking and locking my doors. I do have a spare.
I mean, at least you have a key still.
I do have a key. It's not just the fob. So this is before the changeover.
Although
happened.
mine still, it has a key on it, which leads me to believe
audibly takes out keys.
So it's got this, which I think there's like a little hidden like spring-loaded door thing on the handle somewhere to like insert this and unlock it manually if you really need to.
He audibly gestures using his key fob that he's constructed and
I've
showed
now
the tiny little key
deposited
thing.
it in my pocket. Yeah.
My old car would audibly swing out with a little button on it.
The switchblade?
Yeah, the switchblade. That's right.
My new car doesn't have a fob because it's older.
It's considerably older, but in better condition, which is what matters.
Well,
the muffler hasn't fallen off yet.
And neither has nor the engine blown up. So,
so you're
2 for 2.
2 for 2 on that. It is in better shape technically.
Yeah.
And it is a model which is known for its reliability. So.
Yes. So at least it should be reliable in as much as it'll get you to your next.
It got
ride.
him here, didn't it?
It did get you here.
It has been getting me here and back quite frequently.
Oh, you do also get back?
Yes.
I mean, I
don't
can't
just disappear into the void when I leave your place.
Wait,
object permanence is a thing? What?
I thought when you turn around, you just were gone, like completely.
I thought you only
Now you're telling me you're here this whole time?
As soon as I get out of draw distance, like
you just
I
get
just
unloaded.
despawn.
Yeah, you got to turn down. You turn up your field of
Your render distance.
Yeah, your render distance, and
But my PC can't run that. I don't have the specs for it.
if you have like astigmatism, does that mean you have motion blur turned on?
It's dialed up way too high.
Yeah.
Isn't that cruel? We all get computers to run our quote unquote selves in the matrix. You know, like some people, there's economic disparity.
Yeah.
In
Some
terms
people
of
have
whose computer.
Some people are running on Windows 95.
Yeah. It's like RTX mode on is when you get glasses, or if you just come built with that spec. They have 20/20 vision, and then field of view is like when your eyes are a little wall-eyed. You turn that up. Oh goodness.
And of course, all the little glitches and errors that happen because you don't have the processing power to run all the things.
Yeah. Wait, let's see. What would be like when you're getting like new shaders or like loading in? It's like when you wake
it all
up.
depends on how it's implemented.
Yeah.
Right.
Some games will do like gradual load-ins where they like, like populate the mesh and then kind of the the stuff that goes on top of the mesh, and then the shaders. So.
When it takes you 2 or 3 times to like insert the key or put the key code in, that's just because that room hasn't loaded yet and it wants to hide the loading screen.
Yeah. That's why I can never put my USB in the first time.
And opening the garage door, you have to be in the perfect spot to trigger the event.
Yeah, you have to be in the loading zone for the trigger it.
Facing the correct direction.
Exactly.
Yeah. That reminds me. So as of recording this, when this comes out too, the NFL playoffs are off and running, and catching and throwing and all that stuff. So on Sunday I was trying to watch one of the playoff games, or at least catch it, and we have this digital antenna thing in our apartment. So the stupid thing would only work when I was standing next to it. Every other thing, I'd sit down, it would stop working. I'd move over across the room, it would stop working. So for a while, I just stood there until eventually, presumably, our neighbors shifted something upstairs or something happened and allowed me to sit down. And then one team just sort of like blew the other out, and it wasn't fun to watch anymore by the time I was done. So I just read our homework for our men's group and called it a day for football. But it was funny. It was like super... because the way it worked out, we had like the visibly points, the antennas were like pointed downwards, and my head was like sort
audibly
within the hypotenuse of the triangle. And that is apparently what caused it to work. So, peculiarities in the matrix.
Indeed. Or just in the antenna. It doesn't have to be the matrix. It could just be technology being weird, because it do that sometimes. Particularly
since broadcast wave television isn't so much of a priority in this day and age. From an infrastructure standpoint, it's just going to be janky forever now.
Yeah.
When you can just stream it. So that's what
the
we're
thing
stuck
about
with.
Streaming it is you need to pay for like the website or whatever and all that, and it's like, it's just becoming cable all over again.
Yeah. Which
is precisely why people started wanting to stream, is to avoid cable.
Mm-hmm.
But nope. Big companies going to be big companies, I guess.
They even had one of the NFL playoff games last weekend was a Peacock exclusive. You had to be a subscribing member to watch it.
NBC.
Yeah.
That's their
which is wild that they didn't even broadcast it like for regular. Like, I can understand. There must have been something in there. Like, TV contracts for sports are super weird.
Yeah.
It's a very archaic way of doing things, but at the same time, I don't want to buy 4 subscription services just to watch a couple games out of the year.
It's like, you don't want to pay for 4 subscription services just to watch the Vikings lose.
Yeah, exactly. In a different sport, I was reading an article earlier today. Baseball, hockey, and basketball, I believe, on the professional level are all each team, or there's like batches of teams in different regions of the country that are broadcast by what were called regional sports networks.
Sure.
So they're split and they're affiliated, with the big 3 or whatever. But it is, for those sports, it's like super complicated. You have to find like some weird combination of TV packages to get like those games, or subscribe to the extremely expensive streaming service, which still allows you to have a TV provider in the first place to get them. All this crazy stuff. So unsurprisingly, these regional sports networks are starting to go bankrupt and go out of business. So Amazon is like buying into the regional sports network that plays the Minnesota professional teams. So like the Twins for baseball, the Timberwolves for basketball, and hockey, Wild and stuff, which means that they will potentially start playing those games on Amazon Prime. Now, I already have Amazon Prime, so I don't know if it's going to be a thing where you have to like buy a weird sort of
Amazon
package.
Prime.
Yeah, to like
Amazon
be able to
Prime
watch
Sports.
Amazon Prime Sports, like an extra $15 a month.
You're going to have to pay extra to not have ads now, anyway.
Yeah,
so.
right.
Yeah.
So, if that does mean I can watch on Prime, I'm not. Baseball games happen every day. I'm not going to be able to watch all of them, but it would be nice to just kind of have a baseball game on and do stuff around the house,
You know?
So, but That makes me excited though, because again, like you pretty much around here, you pretty much have to go to a bar to find a baseball game or something.
Even then, you got to trust that they have that game on that day.
Yeah.
Or you could ask them, I suppose. Most of them are pretty good about that.
Especially since it's like the regional, majority favorite team, likely to find. But
and of course, since the
I'm grateful for these regional sports networks going out of business, if only it means it makes my sports viewing slightly more convenient and less expensive.
And the evil conglomerate Amazon gets to suck up yet more of
come
the
watch your
entertainment
Prime
space.
game and come back to your Prime home to have your Prime dinner, worthy Prime citizen, or whatever the
close enough.
Yeah, close enough. But speaking of Prime,
Speaking of Prime.
no, not really.
No, not really.
No, not really.
I was gonna start talking about the energy drink because my nephews are really into it, and it's like exceptionally okay, and that's about it. It's a sweet drink, But when you're in high school or middle school, I guess as they are, it's
so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, energy drinks.
It also doesn't help that it's created and marketed by a couple of YouTubers.
right.
And it's like, oh, I watched this guy who they're not even that great content wise.
No,
But who's going to tell a 12-year-old that,
Mm-hmm. They're not old enough to remember the certain forest in Japan incident.
Ah, yes.
Anyway, how was you guys this week? Those were my musings. My brain is shot from a week of busyness at work, but it's been a good week.
Well, my week has been okay. Pretty all right, actually. Video went up on Sunday, and it has been performing well. As we speak, it's got like 5,000 views on it.
The people, they desire Zelda videos.
Indeed, they do. Which, you know what? That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I'm proud of how it turned out. I'm like, hey.
Well, the thumbnail, the video title, everything was like, yes, this is going to hit.
Well, that's how you do them.
Oh,
I've seen enough videos made and stuff, and I'm like, I've kind of intuited how to title and thumbnail.
Mm-hmm.
But also there's like that. Although I didn't put that much like work into the Twilight Princess video playthroughs, just because I wanted them to be as shit posty as possible.
Yeah, that's like the goal. With that.
The goal is to be as just
outlandish,
like deep fried as I can make them, and unhinged, and I love that.
In the event, we get the video podcast up in some form. You can just go to a different part of the channel if you're viewing this on YouTube in the future.
This is the part where we would link it, like in the little iCard in the corner.
Yeah.
To go watch that.
Still figuring out the logistics.
It baffles me. Could we talk about this briefly? I don't understand why people watch
podcasts.
Video of people talking to each other.
Yeah, I think it started with Joe Rogan.
Me. It did, but like, it was just because it's the popular form. It's like, what's the appeal? It's people sitting around a table talking to each other. Like, this is achieved just as easily by audio.
Here's what I think.
I don't get it, guys.
Facebook or YouTube needs audio, or needs video rather. A lot of the time, what I'll do is like there's like these longer form history videos and things that I like to view. However, it's usually like B-roll or something going on, and I'll just like listen to it like it's a podcast in the background. Like I'm not actively watching it unless there's like graphics to read.
That's
and things like
precisely the point.
Which is the point he's raising against them, though.
Right.
It's like they don't need the video.
But YouTube as a platform is a video platform, and if you want to have podcasts, you need video. So it's weird because now but kind of going against my point, now Spotify has just for everybody you can upload video podcasts.
Because it's the hit thing.
Yeah.
It's not because it makes sense. It's just because people want it.
But, I mean, if that's where the people are, if that's where two of you are, we'll, I guess, make it happen. Hopefully, maybe sort of form.
If you want to see our face so you can watch
like,
our audible gestures.
It's tricky logistically.
It's something like, would it be another vector for someone to listen to our podcast? Sure. Mm-hmm. Is it worth the expense of equipment?
I don't know if it's at this stage. I think it'd just be funny to have
like
one camera pointed at something random or like just
just sock puppets.
Make it meme as we are wont to do.
Like
Okay.
Like have a different like message on the little audibly
little
points
marionettes
to
of
the
ourselves. Just do full Mystery Science Theater where it's just a silhouette in front of like a screen of Steamboat Willie playing on a loop because it's public domain.
No, that's what you do. You like have a sheet on the wall and you
Like
have like a
Mystery
bright
Science Theater.
light shining against us at our backs as it projects onto the wall, and you watch our shadows move, but upside down because it's like the cave.
Yeah. Yes. We have to design our podcast set to be Plato's cave.
Be the tunnel diagram where Saddam Hussein is
Like one of us, like we'll just take turns. It'll be like off of the shelf, except for one of us is in the Saddam Hussein prone position, in a random corner of the room.
Yeah, just point.
Which
the
like
camera.
whenever we speak, we're in that position, and it's just like the camera jumps to us like being in that, and then just like in the next shot we're back sitting in the chair while someone else talks.
Like have
See, this
like,
would almost be like if Wes Anderson did a video podcast. I feel like that's sort of how it would go.
like yellow wallpaper behind you, perfectly square frame on you.
We'd have to practice like our soliloquies without breathing.
Well, that's
Get
not
that
our
down.
style of podcast.
No.
Is the thing. We're a little too casual to really pull that off.
No, yeah. We they must be releasing these gradually or something. We watched
Another one of those Wes Anderson Roald
Shorts
Dahl
on-
short stories.
yeah, The Swan.
I haven't seen a full like Wes Anderson film aside from Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs. But from what I've seen of these short films, I kind of get the feeling that I like his style better in stop motion.
Yeah, because there's like little snippets of these shorts that are stop motion here and there.
But also just like
And,
something
that
about
makes me crave it again.
something about the framing and the staging and the delivery feels awkward, and she's on purpose. But that awkwardness and stiffness kind of works better when you have a puppet you're using.
Because it's like you're watching a moving diorama, like you're
Exactly.
saying, yeah. Last night.
Yeah, I said last night, it's like, I'm looking at a
As
diorama,
we're
but there's
recording
humans in there. There's people
Yep.
in there. Whereas Fantastic Mr. Fox, they're figures in the diorama, and it's a moving diorama.
There's
It
a
feels-
literal
it works
train
better
set in Fantastic Mr. Fox.
a puppet scaled train set
Yeah.
that transitions into another train set.
Like a, yeah.
I hear you there. I think Moonrise Kingdom does a good job of being organic while still being distinctly Wes
I'll
Anderson.
have to watch.
Which
I'll
I
have to
haven't
watch
seen
that.
anything.
I
other
have-
than
I
those.
have
I've
it.
just seen the.
I own it, so we can watch it at some point.
Neat.
And then
As well as Grand Budapest.
That's like the one.
That's
Asteroid
the
City,
one.
I think, is on one of the streaming services I have. Like, that's the most recent one.
I've heard it was not well liked
Well,
because most of them are just homages to very specific things. Like his more recent work, Asteroid City, is like an homage to like a love letter to being a theater kid.
oh, sure.
And what's
Is it his
French
Tenet?
Dispatch was like the love letter to journalism.
Yeah, but apparently very raunchy because French.
Because French. Grand Budapest has a scene or two that, well, not even a scene. It's just like has a thing or two that's distasteful. But
Yeah, from what I gather, Asteroid City only has like one scene that you have to worry about, so we might be able to make that work. But yeah. But that's the other part of it too, like, right? Because those stop motion films are more or less intended towards children, although
They're
Isle of
intended
Dogs
to be
is
family
a little,
films.
is a little more dodgy with the swearing and stuff. But I mean, I think it's funny. But
Right. They
but
have to be cleaner
those
because they're
constraints.
animated.
Those
who you're-
constraints add to the quality of the movie.
The cuss am I?
The cuss you are. The cusses
well,
you burn.
speaking of the quality of the movie,
Yeah, speaking of the quality of moving things, we're the Palladium Papists. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
and I'm Riley.
We're doing a Philmosophical this week on a film that, as it went on, I realized like there's just sort of this sinking feeling that it was going to be more and more difficult to like share my thoughts about it as we went on. Terrance Malick's Tree of Life is what we're doing a Philmosophical on today.
In a world where one man will decide whether to pull a lever and kill one man, or not pull a lever and allow 5 people to die, find out in Philmosophical.
But yeah, like as we were watching the movie and it started getting to more like artsy, expressive side of things, I was like, crap, I'm really going to have to think hard about what I want to say about this on the podcast. Where do you even start with this movie?
Death.
Where indeed?
The beginning of the film is
So we previously-
somebody's daughter and somebody's brother, no, somebody's son and somebody's brother dies.
Yeah.
We start with the perspective of the mom whose son dies, and she's all sad and grieving and kind of praying to God, where were you when this happened? Why do you let this happen? Kind of a thing.
Opens with a quote from the book of Job.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it's by Terrance Malick, who's the director of
A Hidden Life, which we
Hidden
previously
Life, which
covered.
we did that a few episodes ago now, quite a few actually. But go back and listen to that if you so desire. So he's got a very, at least the scenes where there are people in it, it's a very sort of almost documentary style, just up close and personal.
Yes. Some of the hallmarks of his directorial style that I'm beginning to see, having seen 2 of his movies now, are just
2
like...
points makes a line.
Yeah, 2 points does, in fact, make a line. Like, the close-up thing he does a lot. He does, like, these jump cuts to, like, the same perspective, and it's like, jump, zoom out slightly, jump, zoom out, to, like, the same exact shot several times. I begin to see, like, oh, yeah, that wasn't just a Hidden Life choice.
It's like
that's,
sort of a
that's kinda
poetic
how you direct.
repetition to it.
Yeah.
We were talking to a friend of ours at
Theology
Theology
on
on Tap
Tap.
earlier this week. The way he described, he said he likes to think of this movie as a tone poem.
And that's
Which-
precisely,
Yeah.
I think it's really apt. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that works
Yeah.
really well. So that it's going to be difficult because the plot summary of this film is going to be very bare bones because that's not really the point of the movie.
Right.
So yeah, anyway, it opens up. This
With-
couple in vaguely 1960s
50s.
learns their son dies, and there's also like flashes forward to one of the sons in the family who's like an adult now as an architect and kind of living with the, in the aftermath of his brother's death years later and trying to find some sort of meaning in life or whatever.
And so
Yeah.
in the mom's prayer, she asks God, like, where were you? We jump cut to the Big Bang.
Mm-hmm.
And then we watch and follow the formation of the stars and planets.
Mm-hmm.
And then we watch and follow, like,
The
evolution.
There's a dinosaur.
There's a
There's a
dinosaur.
dinosaur.
Another dinosaur steps on him a few times and
Doesn't-
walks away.
It doesn't eat him. It's a dinosaur.
And then it continues with, like,
Hey, look, kelp.
kelp. Kelp, please.
It goes on a lengthy detour of the origin of the universe, therefore implying the reply to her prayer is, God was in,
Everywhere, all
everywhere.
the time.
Yeah.
Orchestrating everything, in
To the smallest
providentially arranging things up to this point. Like, God was in control of all of it.
Yep.
And then rather quickly we catch up to approximately 1940s-ish.
50s.
Well,
Well,
when did
late
the dad meet mom and they get married?
late 40s. It's
Late
implied
40s.
he was in the Navy and got out of the Navy and did the baby boomer production thing. Come back from World War II and have babies.
Yeah, he came back and made baby boomers.
Yep. I mean, that's what happened. So yeah, they get married and they have their kids and stuff. And the oldest, I think, is sort of, I guess, the main character, if you will. Maybe not a main character, but the main perspective, I suppose, of the film.
At least the bulk of the perspective.
Yeah. So growing up, going through the joys and travails of being a toddler and a young child, and now around 12 years old, he's got 2 younger brothers and a dad who's a ambitious businessman trying to be a good man of faith, a good man of the family, and a good shrewd businessman, and not really particularly apparently succeeding at all of them, but not really truly succeeding at all of them. Like, he loves his sons, but he has a sort of fraught relationship with each of them, is a bit on the stern side.
In the typical kind of 20th century way, we're just like, boy, you gonna do what I say, you gonna call me sir. It's like it's devoid of warmth and tenderness. It's this kind
Except
of
for
generational
the mom.
attitude about what a man is supposed to be, and
Yeah.
he's just like something of a dictator, and because that's kind of presumably how his father was to him, and
Yeah.
that's how he learned a father was supposed to be.
I mean, there are moments of like love and tenderness and like togetherness as a family, but the mom and dad fight a bunch. The mom is a little more protective of the boys and wants to preserve this sort of childlike wonder.
She is
stuff.
the picture of the classic, nurturer. She's doting and caring and always like affirms them and makes them feel as though they're good.
Mm-hmm.
And she never really has to rebuke them or be like, not quite as stern and strict as their father is.
Mm-hmm.
Which he's not entirely a fan of, and that's why they get into fights frequently throughout the just course of this basically prolonged montage.
Mm-hmm.
And the
oldest son's kind of struggling with feelings towards his dad, as sons are wont to be, wanting to live up to his expectations because he's the oldest and the dad sort of relies on him the most. And he wants to be loved by his dad, affirmed by his dad, but also struggles against his sternness and conflict and all sorts of things. So the film kind of explores that.
And in one part, he in part kind of resents his dad for not being as loving or understanding as he should be. Mm-hmm. But also he finds himself slowly taking on mannerisms and becoming more like his father. Mm-hmm. Which he hates, but also that's just how he has learned to be a man. Mm-hmm. Because that's what dads do. They give an example of what a man is.
Yeah. So altogether flawed. And the film just kind of keeps progressing with that and cuts back to the future again and, dealing with I feel like the parts with him in the future as an older person, like there's only a few scenes where it's just like dealing with him and his then presence, if you will. A lot of it is just a lot of very abstract musings of his we get to see about,
with very pointed shots of trees.
Yeah.
Very pointed shots of trees.
And wandering around in the desert with the phantasms of his past. Yeah, the movie just kind of keeps going.
Dad goes away for a while on a business trip. Their children rejoice.
Yes. Yeah, they reconnect with their mother some more. The kids get into trouble. They fight with each other. They make up and they're friends. And they screw around and do whatever it is boys do during the summertime in these days. It's like sort of in the 50s, I'd say, is when this is supposed to take place. Mm-hmm. In, I think, Texas.
Yeah, Texas.
Yep.
So,
but like Waco specifically.
Yeah, which is an interesting choice.
When the dad comes back, some time passes, and I believe he loses his job.
Yeah, despite all of his ambitious efforts to advance in his field and be respected by his superiors, he still gets laid off and his plant gets shut down. So the film ends with this part of the story ends with the family having to leave their house where they've grown up and move away.
And at that point, the father does try to make amends and extend a bridge to his son.
He realizes the folly of his ambition and the neglect of somewhat neglect of his family, like his sternness and things like that. So he tries to reconnect and sort of mend fences, I guess, in a way. But they have to sort of leave their old life behind.
And after they drive away, there's a lot of kind of weird trippy shots of them in a desert or a beach or something. And it's all the
Heaven
people.
Heaven question mark?
And it's like the adult version of the son and the actress that played the young mom without the old makeup on.
Yeah.
And
Jessica Chastain and Brad Pitt are the parents in this film.
Yeah. And just a bunch of other characters who showed up briefly. Mm-hmm. And then
the younger brother who died as a young boy. We never see him as an older.
We never see when he dies either.
Well, because he died when he was 19.
Oh yeah.
And the mother receives a Western Union telegram that tells her their son is dead. Mm-hmm. So you could interpret that all sorts of ways of how often those yellow Western Union telegrams are like a you'd receive those if your kid was killed in war, like Vietnam. It could have been that. It could have been he was off somewhere and died in an accident. We really don't know what happened.
But yeah, and then was there a specific shot it like ended on? Because there was like so many times I felt the film was like about to lead into like an ending shot, and it fades out, and something else happens, and then
look, a
big
supernova.
Oh right, it does flash back to space again, doesn't it?
There's a recurring motif. Maybe we'll get to this in the cool things. Is like this sort of wisp of flame we see like 4 or 5 times throughout the film. At least a flame or some light, something or other. Bit of space dust, who knows?
It usually like denotes a change in perspective or a change in like what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because it starts out the mom's talking and we follow the mom for a bit. And then it happens again, and the older son, when he's an adult, is doing things. Then it happens again, and it's the Big Bang. Mm-hmm. So it's like a transitional like change in perspective. It's like, okay, moving into the next one.
Yeah. So this film is much more of an impressionist painting than your cut and dried story-based film.
Yes, it's has narrative in it, but it is not structurally a narrative film.
In as much as like when you're looking at a painting, you can sort of make out like a little story or scenes hidden around. Like if you say you're doing like a painting of a marketplace or something painted by like, I don't know, somebody in the 1600s. You can sort of make out these little slices of life here and there scattered all over the image, but then the image as a whole is much more expressive, and it's difficult to pin down one exact.
It's very dreamlike.
Yes,
it's like, because have you ever had like that experience where it's like you don't remember the start of your dream, you don't remember how you got there, it was just a bunch of incoherent nonsense. Then you start somewhere and it's just kind of vague and impressionistic.
You never know when the dream starts.
Right, exactly.
How did we get here?
Right. How did we get here?
Is the top spinning?
Right. But like this, and it kind of has like a structure you can follow sometimes, and but it's more like just pure raw images and emotions than anything. And then like there's a bunch of gobbledygook and you wake up.
Yep.
Like it kind of has a very
like in the moment you're like, okay, this makes sense, and then afterwards you're like, wait, what?
I remember the bulk where I was in my childhood home and my dad was beating me, but like, but beginning again, I don't know. I was like on a beach or something.
And my mom is like standing on some water. And,
I'm looking at me when I was 12. My dad's there too, I guess. There's these people. They might have shown up at some point.
I think I recognized them. I don't know.
This beach is kind of nice. I'm still in my work clothes, which sucks. But, I just kind of left my wife behind, I guess. We don't know where she is. At least presumably. I don't know. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like short point made long. It's very like dreamlike in its presentation and its flow and its feel.
So, what do we like about this movie?
I like how kind of the meditation. I like the middle chunk because it has the most kind of narrative to it, and I'm a sucker.
Substance, I would say.
The most concrete,
tangible,
relatable, like accessible to everyone substance.
And it had the clearest things it wanted to say.
I appreciate what it set out to do.
Yes. Yeah. That much is clear. That's kind of our general verdict. Is like, I appreciate what this is trying to do. It just didn't draw me in the way I would have liked it.
There was a clear vision, and it was followed, and he had an idea of what he wanted to make, and he went out and made it, and I respect that.
There's some pretty moments.
Is it for me?
Hey, look at the dinosaur.
One of my professors at SPS recommended this to me, and I'm like, he's like, this is a masterpiece. I love this movie. And I'm like, I cannot imagine you, Father Pietro, loving this movie. Like, this almost, like, I had a hard time, like, not thinking the whole space, cosmic unfolding thing was a bit pretentious. Like, I really wanted to not.
It looked really cool.
Visually really cool. Like, it just,
the classical music.
It's supposed to be this meditative piece and like, you know, draw you into where you came from and how you got here, and
God was in
God was in all of it, and like it just, I don't know, it failed to do that for me.
How do the dinosaurs achieve that? Right?
What does the kelp have to say about the human condition?
I don't know. I understand precisely what was attempting to be conveyed. It just, I can't really put my finger on why it failed to get me there.
Yeah. I wonder if it's one of those things where you have to be in like this sort of right state of mind for viewing it.
You think I should smoke weed before watching
well,
it?
some would say, not I.
No. In fact,
there's
think
a sort
that would
of
be a
level of
detriment
receptivity.
Probably.
At least for me, there's sort of a level of receptivity you need to have. I was like trying to be receptive to the movie, but like also sort of apprehensive about like what the heck is why are we looking at the sun?
Well,
you know,
Shut up about the sun. Shut up about this.
Well, the thing is, like, A Hidden Life, when I sat down to watch that, it took me a while to, like, adjust to the storytelling style, to the vibe, right? I sat down expecting, like, a pretty standard film, but then I had to, like, slowly acclimate to it.
It was much more biographical, though. It was easier to relate to it.
Whereas this one, like, I also similarly, it took a while to tune into it, but early on, there was a bunch of blockers, like, why are we here? Why the kelp?
What are we doing?
But once we got into the middle chunk, I was able to like find the vibe and kind of latch on to
study
something.
of microbiology in the ancient world, but what are we doing here?
It's pretty clear what he's trying to do.
Yeah,
just
in the moment, though.
It's hard. Even I recognized it immediately. It's like, yep, this is the creation. This is how we got here. This is kind of, even amongst all these unseen moments, all these obscure things that
this movie probably makes even less sense to people who are not as educated in the basic story of salvation history as we are. Like, if you're not like super familiar with like, you know, Genesis and creation and things, like, I'm sure you can find some way of interpretation and understanding this film, but like not knowing the significance of the verse from Job, you know, in those parts of the Bible where like God is speaking out of the clouds, out of the storm and things like that. And it's like, as the master of creation and so forth, a lot of that meaning is probably lost on people.
I don't know. It's
simple.
I mean, maybe I'm biased as somebody who's kind of lived in this headspace forever, but
Right.
I think it would be easy enough to figure out. Yeah, that he's positing that God was always there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's plausible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've sort of, I mean,
belabored the point a bit.
Yeah.
Right.
We're out of the what do we like about it at this point? Well into, so I guess we touched on some of the motifs.
We'll intermix in other things I liked about it as we go.
Yeah.
One thing that was interesting to me was like after the couple get married and move into a house and stuff, when the baby is first born, one of the first things they do is they plant a tree in the front yard.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of the kids' lives, we see the tree grow. And that's like actually one of the last things in frame as they're driving away is the roots they planted there.
Yep.
As a family. That there's obviously some kind of symbolism to that, given that it's called Tree of Life, and it's this parallel to the family's development, even though there was a bunch of, you know, tension and hardship and tears and blood and stuff. The tree was still there in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was kind of the theme I had in my head from the beginning, is like this film is trying to establish the interconnectedness of things and how life always, it comes from this one source, and like some of these disparate things that seem like they're not connected, like they have no meaning to one another, in fact do have some connection to one another.
It takes that shift in perspective, the more cosmic perspective,
Right.
because, you know, the movie starts off where they're grieving over the tragic loss of a loved one, a son, and they're trying to put that in perspective. You know, where are you, Lord, and all this. But when you look at sort of the cosmic level, even, you know, the deep human like grief is put into perspective by just the sheer grandeur of all creation, and understanding if God is in all of this, surely he is in your moments of pain, you know?
And it's not even the pessimistic, like, oh, the universe is so big and it's everything, and I'm just a tiny little thing and my life doesn't mean anything. It's not like nihilistic like that.
No.
It's hopeful and centered on God.
Right. It's like, oh, this is the God we're dealing with here. You know, it is good to have that sort of perspective every once in a while. Yeah, there's like the sort of deeply personal God who redeemed us individually, but also understanding this is the same person who's created supernovas that are quadrillions of times our size, you know. So yeah, putting things into perspective every once in a while doesn't diminish the human experience, but rather contextualizes it. It's like the human experience is another
is comparable and in a certain respect more grand
and higher
than all of this.
Yeah.
You know, beautiful though it is, cosmic reality. Like there is something so profound about the human person because human persons are capable of relationship.
Yeah.
Where inanimate things aren't.
The dinosaurs and kelp can't have relationship in that way
because of an asteroid. They do show the asteroid, which I think is, I mean, obviously intentional because, like, you know, the destruction of however much life on Earth was caused by that asteroid nevertheless caused a rebirth to happen.
Yes, life and death it's part of the whole thing.
Right. So God's plan, even though it might have seemed like half of the Earth was destroyed in this cataclysmic event, God's plan still bore out, you know? So at least that's how I understood that inclusion in there, you know?
Or maybe it was just an explanation for why the whole film wasn't about dinosaurs. It's like, oh, we're not talking about dinosaurs, they're dead.
Yeah. Or we're talking about dinosaurs because they're dead.
Because they're dead, yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason anybody really talks
The
about
dad works for an oil company.
that he do.
Everything's connected. It's all a tree.
Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah.
I found the contrast between the mother and the father very interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
And
not
kind of-
simplistic either.
No, but it kind of gets at the archetypes in a way that I think is good. Like, I think the mother is a very good mother, does what a mother is made to do. Like, the mother's role in a family is to be the nurturer, is to be the caregiver, is to be the one that affirms and, you know, convinces the child of their goodness and that the world is a delightful place to be in and that they are delighted in. The father fulfills his role to a certain extent. Like, the father is a lawgiver. He's the one that holds a standard for his children to rise to. And yet there's some imperfection in the way he carries it out, right? He lacks an understanding of developmental stages. And so he treats, and even if a person were an adult, this isn't the right way to treat them, but like, he sets an uncompromising standard. He sets because it's kind of about him. It's about Brad Pitt, not about the son.
Yeah.
You know, this is what I think. I am in charge here.
He's
You will
trying-
follow my
it's about
law.
his successes and his, career and his life.
The grand things he's seeking to build and appreciate, because he's also like a talented musician.
He's a very talented musician, and yeah, there's a cool.
So he has an appreciation for beauty in his own way.
Yeah, there's a brief shot at the beginning where he's like, the last thing I said to him was like criticizing the way he turned the pages or something to that effect. And and it's like, you know, music was so thoroughly a part of him, and yet like he was it seems to me just kind of a victim of this repeated cycle of 20th century liberalist fatherhood, where it's like, I am the king, I am a
twisted
dictator.
sense of excellence.
It's not there's a degree to which each parent, steps into the domain of the other role. But their primary role is, the lawgiver and the nurturer, respectively. And there's, he doesn't have the vision of God's fatherhood Or maybe he does, and it's this distorted vision that looks a lot similar to how he fathers.
Yep.
And how he was fathered. And it's like, you know, if you have any sort of understanding of how the Father works with us, like, it's hard to be a domineering father when you're just like, that's not how God is with me. God is infinitely patient with me, always calling me to higher, always asking me to grow, but never like beating me over my failures or tearing me down.
It seems as if when you look at him at the beginning of the movie, which is more towards like later in life or whatever, and like sort of the experience of losing his job and the life that he had built and striven for sort of humbled him a little bit and gave him a shift in perspective. Obviously not completely, because, you know, he still has sort of a complicated relationship with his sons. But it seems as if he has come to some sort of understanding at the end of the film.
He's kind of been disabused of his self-reliance to a certain degree.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not in charge of life here. Like, I'm an agent, but I'm not.
Because he goes on.
I'm not the one running the show here.
He goes on this big trip around the world, thinking he's like finally made it, you know, in business, and it all just comes crashing down anyway.
So he begins to recognize his dependence, and
unclear to what
how
extent.
essential that is to being a son, is to be dependent, to rely on one's father to care for them.
Yeah. And then there's the son character. You know, he, you know, as any 12-year-old boy would, just kind of going around trying to understand the boundaries of life and, you know, his relationship with his dad and, like, you know, occasional spats with his mom, who's still trying to keep him, you know, trying to nurture him, but he's not super receptive to it.
There was a couple of scenes, like, toward the end of the middle of the family arc of the film, where when the dad comes back from the trip, I believe, he gets into a very large fight with his wife because of, oh, you let the boys do this and that and the other thing. And it's at that point when the oldest son kind of realizes, oh, mom's kind of a doormat, I can get away with things.
Yep.
Which is, you know, just
Not a
the
great
attitude
thing,
he adopts for a chunk of the film until he's like, why am I being like him? I hate him.
And he's, you know, his attitude is like, you know, he's literally like physically hurting his younger brothers and real understanding, like, wait a minute, I love them. Why would I do this?
So toward the end, two men come to realize, oh, wait, I love these people. Why am I hurting them?
And there's sort of a brief conversation like future kid has with his dad on the phone. It's like, you know, I'm sorry about the things I like, apparently still arguing with his dad here and there. And like, there's like sort of a brief implied conversation about the brother they lost. It's like, yeah, I still think about him every day. So like, it's clear that, you know, he's musing upon these things and I guess the film present or whatever perspective. So clearly, like, he's still, like, kind of trying to understand the impact these things have had on his life, as people are wont to do once they reach middle age, I suppose, because he's a very successful architect, as it is implied, but still kind of, you know, from just a couple scenes, like, struggling to connect with his wife, struggling to, you know, understand himself in this movie, is sort of a meditation on his life, springing from that.
Which in general, like, it's almost a meditation on like the generational issues of the baby boomers to Gen X kind of relationship. Because there's like kind of a paradigm there that is fairly common that you see both in real life and in all sorts of media between like, I wish I had looked up or knew the statistics and stuff, right?
Gen X is significantly smaller than the baby boomers.
Well, yes. But also like things like divorce rates and things like that, where it's like there's a difference in just attitude in a lot of ways. And
despite their strange marriage the parents stick together in this film, which is interesting.
That's kind of the cultural expectation. Like,
Yeah.
it's still a very Christian America at this time, and divorce is just not a thing that's...
I think they're Catholic
I
in this
don't...
film.
I'm not positive.
Yeah.
That church doesn't look very Catholic.
But
then again, very few do.
But
sometimes they
Hollywood
film in like
films.
Episcopalian churches or something like that. But like, the dad does the sign of the cross and stuff.
I'm thinking they're Anglo.
That could be
That's my best 2
Presbyterian
cents.
or something like that.
Because they don't say like...
I suppose in Texas
they don't say the common meal grace
No, they
that
don't.
we do.
So they're probably like Texas Presbyterian or something
Something like
that.
that,
If
yeah.
that's a thing, I don't know. But regardless. Very Christian, culturally speaking, at least.
In practice, not all the time, as is unfortunately all too common with air quotes practicing Christians.
Yeah. So, I guess any other thoughts before we get into the sort of transcendental analysis? I feel like we covered.
I think we covered a lot of it, and anything else we have to say really would be covered in the transcendentals.
Yeah. So, truth. What truths can we find in this movie?
It's all connected.
Yeah. The universe.
Me.
Yeah.
I am part of this. I am part of a cosmic whole. I am part of and subject to the providence of God in everything. And things that seem disparate are not really. There's kind of a one direction. There's one...
But not that one.
Not that one. Not the, mid 2010s boy band. There's a unified direction that is part of God's plan for the universe.
Yep.
And we are part of that.
Yep.
And also we're stewards of like God's creation, right? And as such, we're entrusted with nurturing and bringing up the things in our life, be it the tree in our front yard or our kids.
Our kids as they go from boys to men, if you will.
How many more boy band names can we work in here? You could say that the task is to become in sync with one another.
Right.
As they navigate the back streets and get into mischief.
But like, there's this kind of almost meditation on what we pass on to the next generation and how the sins of the father kind of permeate into the lives of their sons, right? At this point, it is specifically the father who is kind of the most out of touch, out of sync with God's plan. And so it affects the boys in a way that really doesn't leave the oldest son at all, even when he's an adult. You can see
clear
that
the mom, she knows how to connect with her kids, but only like in really one way, it seems. Obviously,
I don't know if I agree with that.
Well,
say more.
Because like every time she interacts with them in the way she wants, it's always like connecting with nature, having lighthearted fun, things like that. But she doesn't know how to deal with anger, it seems like. And when the boys express anger, she doesn't know what to do with them or talk them through it outside of that way. So I guess that's more what I mean.
Yeah, I think she knows how to connect with them in multiple ways, but I would agree with you on that point. She is not good at dealing with conflict. Nobody is in that family.
No.
There's just like conflict is either
I win, you lose. Good
it's
day
just
to
like
you.
there is no conflict. You don't get to have it.
Yep.
What I say is law. That's it.
You define me at the dinner table, there will be hell to pay. That sort of attitude.
Yeah.
Turns out that's hurtful.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Conflict is good when you do it right, and really, really bad when you do it wrong. And that's why everyone,
lifelong.
That's why so many people I know are so conflict avoidant, because they like see their parents doing stuff like this, and you're like, I want no part of that. And then you lose out on the healthy part of
the
conflict.
opposite problem.
where nobody knows how to have conflict with each other, and lots of people's needs get left behind, and there's a lot of problems that come from having no conflict either. So, but there's always a right way to do it.
Yep.
This ain't the right way. But yeah, the kind of generational wounds and sins are definitely a through line here.
And
but
God,
also, like,
God is in it all.
Right. And that's kind of what I feel like the tree represented. It was like God being the backbone of their lives, the through line that keeps them together, kind of a thing. And so, like, even in our brokenness, God is there and hears us and loves us and
is always also there in the joy, but it doesn't seem like the family is necessarily like, maybe the mom, but like the kids and the dad aren't in tune with that side of it. Because, you know, often, you know, usually most of the prayers are like in distress, as is a normal human tendency when you're not, when you're, you know, when your relationship with God is in a certain spot.
It's a lot easier to cry out for help when you're in trouble.
And it's also really hard to give away your joy and to be like, thank you for this joy, Lord. You sort of possess it and like want to control it yourself. And like, it's genuinely harder. And this kind of blows people's minds when I tell them this, like, give God your joys, like share them with him. You don't stop having them. Don't throw them out. But like,
and like the inclusion of Job, like the Bible, like the references to Job in this film, because most of the book is like, you know, of Job is like he is brought low. Everything in his world is like a source of suffering to him. Now all these good things have been taken away from him, and so that is probably the most relatable part of his like crying out to God for, I guess, justice. You know, for his innocence in the face of wrongdoing. And so it doesn't really, because there's also parts of the Bible where, you know, especially in the Psalms, where you're like singing out of, you know, joyful exultation in the Lord and his blessings for you. That part doesn't really come through.
Like everything belongs to God. None of it is really ours. And we have to give it all to him. And it's, for some, it's hard to give suffering. For some, it's easy. I think Catholics have swung the pendulum a little bit too far to the suffering side. Offered up. It's like, well, when you're happy, offer it up too.
Yep.
When everything is as you love it and your life is delightful, offer that up too.
Like I did, like growing up, I did hear that like a decent amount, but like never emphasized to the degree of when things suck, offer them up.
Right. It's like you're complaining, shut up and pray. It's kind of an attitude that can come off when people say that sometimes.
Right, even if not intended.
When
you're a kid, you have limited understanding, so that's how things come across is just how they are to you.
Right, exactly.
At that age, you know. So,
but yeah, I think that's
there's many more things we could touch on, but they all kind of work into those broader categories, I think. So
goodness. What is good in a tree of life?
God.
Yes.
All
the time.
In, you know, not so forthrightly so, and he's kind of hidden amongst the background, you know, virtually imperceptible without eyes to see. Interesting how that is. But yeah, nevertheless constant and present.
And like there are moments when both parents are doing it right, you know, when the mom, there's more like moments of goodness with the mom and the boys, but also there's like when the dad hears the middle son, I believe, playing piano or guitar, and he's like, the kid's playing guitar on the porch, and dad starts playing piano with him, and there's that connection, and later in the film you see him connecting with that son over music. He's found a thing that
like the older son is like turning the
connect
pages for his dad and just sort of admiring his skill with the organ. You know, them having a picnic together as a family on the front lawn, things like that, chasing each other around with like the garden hose and things like that.
And so like there are moments when they come together and there's that love and that peace that should be there, and those are kind of just the bright spots in kind of just otherwise messy life.
And the dad, despite his flaws, still recognizes his sons as his crowning achievement in life, and sort of gives that level of validation, at least.
It is still like,
though flawed.
it is still flawed, where it's like they're his crowning achievements.
Right.
They're his greatest work.
Mm-hmm.
But
maybe not as much to be appreciated for their own sake as they should be.
Mm-hmm.
As worthy of love,
as
reflections of himself.
Right. Which, it's in man's nature to want to make things in your image because we are godly people, and that's what God did.
Mm-hmm. Made in his likeness.
And we are made in his likeness. So like, it's kind of a thing we biologically want to do.
It's a fallen, it's just sort of a fallen attempt.
I don't even know if that's a fallen thing.
Not fallen, but
the attribute in itself is not fallen, but it has.
But like
it's his
it is
expression
affected
of it.
by the fall.
Yeah. And the dad's expression of that desire to create,
and it's good to want to share the things you love, and like, for your sons to share in those things is a beautiful thing, but trying to force it is another thing, which I think he does a fair job of, like, not forcing his sons to be musicians,
Yeah, he doesn't, like, he puts a lot of pressure on the oldest son to be the best. Puts a little bit of extra pressure, but it doesn't really he gives him very specific directions on, okay, this is how you take care of the yard, these are the chores, this is the way you behave at the dinner table, like sort of a general way, but not, I suppose not really so much molding them into the exact people he wants them to be. I mean, many people, from the baby boomer generation were like pushed to excel, and later in life, did come to a great degree of material success, as we see in the case of the I guess sort of main character. He becomes a successful,
the eldest son.
Yeah, the eldest son. He does go off and become very successful. Probably a lot owed to his dad's push to be excellent, however flawed that might be. But as you see him sort of musing on his life, wondering how he got here, these flaws come out because he's still not living a fully integrated life despite his apparent material success.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of
beauty.
That's the main focus of this film. I feel like it's
a very poetic film. The special effects scenes of the universe and creation and stuff are pretty well done. Cinematography, it's a Terrance Malick film, so it's very beautifully shot and very sort of naturalistic, very up close,
kind of simultaneously naturalistic and personalistic.
Yep.
Gets very up in your face.
Yes.
Shows just like the face feels like the whole frame a lot of the time. So,
very intentionally.
And yet there's a lot of nature integrated in it, and it's very because that's kind of what humanity had been for most of its existence, is kind of this harmonious living in nature. Ryan Sheridan, if you're listening to this, is going to kill me. But there's this great, I think I've mentioned it on the book, the great book by Romano Guardini called Letters from Lake Como. That kind of,
I think so, yeah.
I'm quite sure I've talked about it, actually.
Probably.
And it just it's his, Guardini's lament about the way we have separated from nature and are no longer, we have dominated it and mastered it instead of living in harmony with it. And Malick kind of shows you, this is what a harmonious living with nature looks like.
I think, I'm pretty sure we talked about this when we did In Life.
Probably.
There was a lot of that, too.
I thought it was even before that, though.
Could be. I mean, certainly in our personal discussions, they sort of blur together.
It's kind of how this podcast is sometimes.
Yeah.
Did we record that, or did we just talk about that?
Who knows? But anyway, yeah.
But this is a very beautifully put together film. Almost style over substance. There's substance there, and it's good, but it's
there are moments.
The focus is a little bit more on how it's presented sometimes.
There are moments where, like you said earlier, it's this starts to teeter towards pretentious in its presentation, and that's probably why a lot of the artsy people tend to go for it.
And I consider myself on, the upper quartile of artsy people.
Yeah.
And if I don't like it, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or
So-
I like it. I
it's
just
not that
found
we
it hard.
disliked it.
I found that
No.
it failed to do what I thought it was setting out to do for me. So
But no.
Yeah. Understanding, yes. Appreciation, not as much.
appreciation, yes.
I-
Liking,
Wait.
not as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand and
that's a better way
appreciate
of-
what it was
yeah.
trying to get into, but like, was it for me? I don't know. But if it's
My affective enjoyment of it was not to the level I would have liked.
which that's a me problem.
Right. So you could,
It couldn't be also an art problem, but in this case, I don't think it is.
yeah.
It could be a problem with the
So
thing
we've certainly
itself,
talked to
but it's
people
like-
who enjoyed it more than we did.
right.
So there must be something to it. So Unity, I'd say,
Tree,
tree, God,
God, life.
God, life, of
Fess and the universe, in its boundaries and formed its foundations and all that.
kelp.
Yeah. See, that was the real theme this whole time, was the kelp and the microbiology in the sea.
It was the lizard man.
That's why we saw dinosaurs. They were all the lizard men.
And the stomping dinosaur who stomps on the other one's head without eating it. I was waiting for it to eat it.
I wanted to see the dino get eaten.
Maybe it's because I grew up watching Walking with Dinosaurs, because that was one of the 4 DVDs we had when we first got a DVD player.
Anyway, let's land this plane.
Yeah.
Let's end this.
Yes. God is in and through the whole universe and the creator of it. And
Nothing is disparate.
yeah, it's all connected.
Everything like bad happening in your life is because it revolves around you.
And thus we have come full circle.
We've come full circle.
As I almost certainly intended it, of course.
It's all connected.
Speaking of things that are connected, you can connect to us on email with playingpapist@gmail.com if you have questions, comments, concerns, or complaints or suggestions for future episodes. You can listen to us on, of course, we're on Spotify and not Stitcher anymore. Sorry, Nathan's mom. We have to make that one more time. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. YouTube,
Maybe YouTube.
Question.
Question mark.
We'll continue to hold it as uncertain until it is made certain. So we will talk to you guys again in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.